Okay, Counselor, we are ready to go.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Let me go back to the agenda. Here we are. Good morning. I'd like to call the meeting of the HWRF Pension Administration Subcommittee meeting to order. Members of the public are advised that our meetings are webcast live by the City of Hamilton and temporarily archived on the city's website. As well, a reminder that all electronic devices are to be switched to non-audible function during the committee meeting. And I will take lead to that and turn my phone off as well because I am on speaker right now as well. So anyway, so I'm going to call for a roll call. If you just say yes, you're here. Myself, yes, Angela has that. Councillor Ferguson. I know he was here. Where did he go?
Yeah, I'm present, Madam Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Don Alford. Don is here, was here, I thought. Was he not? Yes, Don is here.
He is. He just has to unmute himself. That's all.
Okay. He's not sure what to do. Okay, Don. Oh, hang on.
I think he's.
We just want to be sure he can hear. So, oh dear. Okay. We can get a message to him, can we?
So we can through the chair. Don. Oh, Don, you just unmuted yourself. Oh, and you muted yourself again. Can you give us a thumbs up, Don, if you hear us?
Don. Oh, he's not hearing. Shoot.
Don, can you hear us? Don Alford. Okay, I will have. We'll try and contact him at home. Maybe.
Okay. Oh. There. Okay, Don. Thank you. Good morning. Don't touch any buttons, Don.
Good morning, Don. Can you hear me? No.
Can you hear us, Don?
Oh.
Don, can you hear us? Don, can you hear us?
With the hand signals.
Can you hear us, Don?
Oh, me. Can I have my coffee there?
So, Madam Chair,
we can hear him very well.
Yeah, we'll try and get a hold of him separately.
Okay, that's fine, but he's here. Don Scarrett. Don Scarrett. He's on mute as well. Maybe we should advise him to be unmuted until we do an attendance thing.
Don Scarrett, can you hear us this morning? Can you hear us, Don? Okay, I will follow up, Councillor.
Oh my God.
Okay, I'm just going to try and write a note. Mute for roll call. I don't know if anybody can see that, but maybe. Oh, it's backwards. Shoot, that's no good. Sorry, I was going to try. Anyways, Don is here.
It's actually not backwards for us.
No?
No,
okay.
No, just for you.
Okay. Just making a note. Maybe everybody can see it. Please unmute. Unmute. Okay, Don Alford, you're unmuted. You're okay. Don Scarrett, please unmute.
I said mute. Unmute.
Unmute. You're okay. No. Oh, God. Okay. We're not going to get there.
So, Councillor, we're going to call them if you want to start, and hopefully they can hear us.
Okay, so we have Don is here and his wife is helping. So there we go. Thank you, Mrs. Scarrett. Thank you. Leave it unmuted. Good morning, Don. And Jim Gardzinski. Jim, you're here. You can say hi. Thank you. Robert Slack, you're here.
Yes, I am.
Thank you, sir. And I have Harvey Hicks is sent his regrets. And so Harvey Hicks sent his regrets, right? Angela? Yeah.
I'm also muted through the chair. Yes, he sent his regrets.
Okay. Thank you. So, Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda this morning?
No, Madam Chair, there are no changes to the agenda.
Okay, so I'm going to ask for a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda as presented. I'm going to say moved by Jim, seconded by, I'm going to go Don because he's unmuted. And I'm only going to ask if there's anyone that is opposed, with a show of hands. If anybody's opposed to it, then we'll move that it's been carried. Seeing nobody, it's carried. Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest today? Seeing none, may I have approval of the previous minutes meeting of December the 10th, 2019. And that would be Councillor Ferguson. You're going to move that? Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. And I'll go with Bob Slack. Okay. Anyone opposed to that? Seeing none, that's carried. Thank you. We'll move right into staff presentations. So item 8.1 is 2020 Master Trust Pension Statement of Investment Policies and Procedures, FCS 20074 citywide. I have Nathan Lapierre from Aon is here with a presentation on asset liability modeling. Welcome, Nathan. I hope you have your presentation. Thank you. He's going to share his presentation now.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Hello.
Thank
Hi,
you.
everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. So I'll just do a very quick introduction of myself. I am from Aon, and so I work in what we call our financial risk consulting practice, which spans both our actuarial practice and investment consulting practice. And what we help pension plans and pension plan sponsors do is set their strategic asset allocation. So basically set the allocation that goes into the SIP, the Statement of Investment Policies and Procedures. So the way that we do that is with an asset liability study. And so the presentation that I have here is to introduce the trustees to what an asset liability modeling study is. So first of all, on this page, we have just some reasons that you might want to consider doing an asset liability study now. So first is to review or calibrate the investment strategy for the plan assets. What we do when we do an asset liability study is we review the investment objectives and risks. We would incorporate the most recent regulations for contributing to the plans, and also then incorporate current capital market assumptions and conditions. And the second reason is to fulfill the requirements of the Statement of Investment Policies and Procedures, which requires an asset liability study when there are significant changes to regulations. And we have in Ontario just gone through some pretty significant changes to regulations with the funding regulations that has recently occurred. And the next item is the SIP also indicates that an asset liability study should be performed when capital market conditions change significantly compared to the ones used in the previous study. And the last study was performed in 2010, and of course the world has changed quite significantly since 2010, and especially now in the midst of COVID, financial conditions are quite different. So what we'll go over basically is what an asset liability study is. And on this page, we are situating the asset liability study within the investment policy governance process of a pension plan. So a pension plan, every pension plan at the top of this figure, every pension plan has objectives. So the plan sponsor has objectives, the trustees have objectives, every plan has objectives. And the asset liability study needs to take into account what those objectives are. And so an asset liability study starts with a discussion of objectives. It then takes the discussion of objectives, and what we would do then is move on to an asset liability study or an asset liability modeling process to help set, and then the final item that you see on this figure is a strategic asset mix. So the purpose of an asset liability study is to have all these discussions on what your objectives are, to use those objectives with basically what the toolbox is, toolbox meaning the various asset classes that you can invest a pension plan is, and to use that toolbox to then inform your strategic asset mix, the asset mix that goes into the Statement of Investment Policies and Procedures. Implementation then follows that. So implementation takes the strategic asset mix, it creates an investment manager structure around that. You then move to manager selection and then monitoring the investment performance of the investment managers. And you do that sort of cycle over a number of years. And that's generally the cycle for any for any pension plan in setting investment policy and governing the investment policy. The asset liability study stops with the strategic asset mix, though, and then if something comes out of the asset liability study in terms of investment managers and so on, that would follow on. What is an asset liability study? An asset liability study is that the sort of core of an asset liability study is a model. So the way that we do an asset liability study is we build a model. And the model contains two components. One we call an economic scenario generator, and then the other a projection module. I won't go over exactly all the detail in terms of this, but suffice it to say, what we are doing is we are using assumptions for asset classes. So assumptions in terms of what we would expect as return from asset classes, what volatility asset classes would have, and then how returns between various asset classes correlate with one another. And we do the same with liabilities. So interest rates are also modeled, and interest rates impact the value of the liabilities. We do that, then use that is all done within an economic scenario generator. And then that is used within the projection module. The projection module is taking the plan's valuations, projecting the demographics of the plans, so projecting projecting each of the plans and each of the participants of the plans over a 10-year period, marrying all of that with our return expectations, volatilities of returns, and correlations amongst returns to give you a sense as to, over a 10-year period, what will valuations look like? So what will your funded status be? What will the variability around funded status be? So how good can the funded status be? How bad can the funded status be? What does that mean for contributions? And then looking at that, can we make some positive changes to some of those figures? So can we make some positive changes to what contributions might look like or what funded statuses might look like by changing the asset mix? Can we improve the outcomes by changing the asset mix? So the core of it is a model that we build. And then the more important part of the whole process is the discussion that we have around it to understand objectives, to understand what the future might hold for the plan and how we might improve some of those outcomes. Capital market assumption setting process. I won't go through all of this, but we have quite a robust process for setting assumptions. And we set assumptions both on a forward-looking basis, so what we think expected returns for various asset classes will be, but then we also inform especially the risk from various asset classes based on historical returns and historical correlations between returns for the various asset classes. Our approach for doing an asset liability study, as I stated at the beginning of this presentation, it starts with planning. It starts with understanding your objectives, and it also then, we would go over what the assumptions are that we would be using. We would go over how our model works in a little bit more detail. So this meeting here isn't designed, so my discussion today isn't designed to so that you know exactly how everything has worked. It's just to give you a sort of overview of what it might look like. So phase one is planning, objective, and assumption setting. Phase two is what we call risk diagnosis. So it's looking at a projection of results for the plans if we didn't change the asset mix, so that you can see what our model looks like basically for the current asset mix. And then the third phase is looking at if we can improve the results that we saw in phase two by making some changes to the asset mix. The planning meeting, like I said, it's discussing the work plan and objectives, assumptions, talking to you about risk tolerance and so on, establishing your objectives in terms of risk management, identifying what's in the toolbox, so which asset classes we should consider, which you might want to consider, any constraints on those asset classes and so on. The second stage is what we call the risk diagnosis, and you can see basically a graph below here where the dark line in the middle gives you what we might expect for contributions. This is just a sample though, this is not your plans, so it's just a sample of what it looks like. The dark line is, for example, what we might expect contributions to look like, and then all the color around the line is to say what would happen if in worst case results, in this figure, we're saying in our expected example, contributions are between 2 and 4 million. In worst case scenarios, contributions in any given year could be around 18 million. So it's giving you a sense in this stage what your results, what we expect your results to look like if our expected assumptions take place, and then what worst cases can be, or even best cases, that's below the median line. That's what happens in the risk diagnosis. In the optimization, then, the third phase, and in essence, the final phase, we're doing the same type of analysis, but we're showing the current asset mix, and then we would be showing what would happen if we changed the asset mix. So these are all various more efficient asset mixes. So what we have on this graph is on the vertical axis, the expected, so average contributions, and then on the horizontal axis, we have worst case contributions. And therefore, these portfolios that are optimal portfolios are better than current because they have lower worst case contributions for, in the case of some portfolios, for the same present value of for the same expected contributions. But basically what we would show is various different, more optimal portfolios along a risk and return perspective. So you can decide then, and we'd make some recommendations as well, you can decide how much risk is appropriate for your desire, in essence, potentially to reduce expected contributions. The way the project works then is exactly in those phases that I described, with a planning meeting, a risk diagnosis meeting, and an optimization meeting, with the optimization meeting, the outcome being our recommendations for potential changes in the asset mix. And generally between each meeting, there would be 6 weeks between each meeting to come to the conclusion of the study. I know that was probably a bit of a whirlwind discussion of an asset liability study, but I think I'll just bring it back to why we think it makes sense to do an asset liability study, which is that it is the process that we go through to set a strategic asset allocation, to make potential changes to the asset mix. And we think that you're about due to do one, given what's happened in capital markets and given what the changes that we've seen to the funding rules in Ontario. With that, that concludes my formal presentation, and I'm happy to take questions if there are any.
Just as a straightforward question, Nathan.
Yeah. Nathan, sorry, hang on a second. Nathan, can you remove your
Yes, I will do that. Yeah. Sorry about that.
And I think I've got Jerry talking, correct?
Yes. Wait a moment. Just as an aside, Nathan worked on this originally with Hewitt. Hewitt has been taken over by Aon. So he has experience in setting up the original scenario for this dynamic investment policy.
That's correct.
Now, is there, as a question to the committee, and I think the last time we did this in 2010, The approval actually was given by AF&A. But it's now kind of written into our policy as well that an asset liability study should be done.
Okay, Jerry, can you keep talking into your mic because you keep fading away?
Oh, am I?
Thank you.
Okay. I don't have a direct mic.
That's okay.
Sorry. So I was wondering would we be requesting an approval from the council here, this subcommittee, and then going forward with one if we were to go forward with one? Or would we be taking it to AF&A? Mason, could you point out if there's any, or Vlad, upset cost in these? I believe it's done on a certain pricing basis.
I believe, Jerry, I think Angela may answer, but I believe anything on this committee has to go to audit and finance, and somebody's in twice. Sorry.
Sorry, through the chair, it was Don Alford, so I've just muted his other one.
Okay. Somebody's in twice. That's why you get feedback. Okay. So again, Jerry, I believe that it would have minutes of this committee that goes to audit and finance. And Angela can clarify.
Yeah, through the chair, sorry. Yes, the minutes of this committee do go to AF&A. So if committee was to put forward a motion through here, it would then subsequently be approved at AF&A and then on to council.
Right. Okay. Thank you, everyone. So with that, are there any other questions of Nathan or Vlad or Lloyd? Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, just one question, Nathan. What's this cost?
So our proposed fee for it for all 3 plans was 90,000. So that's in total, not per plan. 90,000 for all 3 plans.
So either Brian or Rick, you're the experts in this area. What'd you recommend?
Is Rick on?
Rick's I assure you, Rick's on. Yes, he's muted though.
Yeah, I'm here.
Brian's
Good
not
morning.
muted. Oh, there's Rick. Yeah. So what's your recommendation, Rick?
We undertake these studies on occasion, and I think it's probably warranted. I'm not sure if the price is good or bad because I wasn't involved in any discussions, but undertaking the study would be a prudent thing to do, and we can confirm the who will be undertaking the study and the price to do it.
Okay.
Okay, so you think it's necessary, Rick, that the market's within 3% of the ultimate.
Pardon?
It's hard to hear you, Lloyd. Sorry, I don't know where we're getting something.
Okay,
in the
I'm going
background.
to.
Sorry to interrupt. Through the chair, if you're not speaking, if you could mute your microphone while you're not speaking, just that'll also help with the feedback. Thank you.
So I've unmuted my mic. Is that a little clear? Or my camera?
Yeah, that's better.
Sure. That's better.
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So Rick, is it necessary when the markets are performing within 3% of the all-time record right now? I'm thinking of the TSX.
Well, I'm not into the stock markets myself, so I really couldn't comment on that. But if you look at what would have happened if we were required to do an actuarial valuation at the end of this year rather than at the end of last year, our assets would have been probably substantially down and would have required us to fund significant amounts of money into the plan. By doing the longer term study, it allows us to get into less risky ventures, so there's less chance that something like the COVID, it won't have as big an impact as what it would if we didn't have a study and we weren't following what the study indicated we should be investing in.
Okay, is Brian McMullen on the line? I see he's here, but he's muted. So Brian, your thoughts about this?
Yeah, so through the chair, Jerry and I have had a conversation about this, and it seems like it's time to be warranted to do this study.
Okay, that's all my questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Don, did you have a question? If you did, please unmute yourself.
I'm unmuted.
No, okay. You're still muted, Don. That little red symbol has to
Try
come
again.
off.
Well, it doesn't want to come on.
Don, you're on twice. Gone on twice.
I don't know. I don't know.
Do you see that,
I got a
Angela?
mute thing down here and I got a mute thing up here.
Yeah,
So,
through the chair, he
Right.
was really struggling with his audio, so I think he signed on a second time, and because he was able to hear, I didn't really want to kick him off one.
Okay.
So,
Okay, Don.
maybe if he
Yep.
could just ask his question, and then I'll mute him on the second one.
Don, go ahead.
My first question was to be prorated on the amounts that each plan has. And of course, the HSR is the big one. And at this point of view, what I've heard, I think we should table that for further discussions amongst the people in the city hall and us, anyone to review what we're looking at, 90,000 a year plan. So that's what I would like to do right now, table it. So I'll move it.
Okay, so Don, so Angela, can I ask the question then to Nathan before we have that tabling put on the floor? Nathan, you said the fee was 90,000 for the 3 plans, correct? So you're evenly distributing the cost of the plans?
So we haven't discussed that, and in essence, there could be a method of splitting it that takes into account the plan size as well. So that may also be appropriate. And I should just clarify that it's 90,000 one time. So basically, when you do a study, it's 90,000. It's not an ongoing cost.
That was my question. So Don, I appreciate and certainly a valid point you raised. Do you maybe want to suggest that I don't think we need to take this direction for Audit and Finance Committee meeting to approve the funding of this, but that they look at the prorating the cost equitably to the 3 funds based on the funds holdings, I guess. Does that sound right, Nathan?
Yes, what I'm referring to, we all know that both the HMRF and the HR, the police and the fire are dying funds. There's no more increases in it. There's no income coming to it other than what it earns. And as we die off, of course, the plan, and I noticed the police now has got a surplus. We still have a surplus. HSR, I haven't looked at it yet. So you can see where we're easy on investments. If it's making 4 and 5%, we're going to do well over the next till the last guy ends up gone the plan, gone. So can you follow me on that? If we spend the money for our plans are sort of dying. We're separate then of the two. The 2 plans are separate from the HSR. Everybody follow that?
I do follow it, yes. Nathan, suggestion?
So I do think, I think that each of the plans may be in a situation at the moment where they should have their own asset mix, and that's one of the things that we would look at in the study. I do think generally you need some process for setting the asset mix, unless you're definitely happy with the asset mix as it is already. But usually we think it's a good idea to have a governance process for setting that asset mix periodically. I do think it potentially warrants different asset mixes for different plans, though.
And that's what would be reviewed in this $90,000
yes. Yes.
project.
That's right.
Okay. So Dawn, I'm going to turn back to you and if there's something else you wish to contribute. So you still want to table this? Sorry, Angela, can you unmute Dawn?
I'm unmuted,
Okay.
I think.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm just, it's one of those things, we got it today and we haven't really looked at all the ramifications of it. That's one. I just wondered if the committee, a few people have done it, looked at it ahead of us, you know. Is anyone is anybody here on the pension committees of the city hall? I don't see anybody here, like our people in the city hall that does some of the work.
Well, Rick Mail is here and Brian McMullen is here. Barbara,
Rick.
no. Yeah, I think Barbara.
Barbara's here. Yeah.
And Jerry Wojcik is here.
Okay. Well,
Okay.
Jerry has been our leader in
Yeah.
making suggestions, and I would leave it with him. Leave it with him. Okay.
So are you asking for Jerry's viewpoint then, Don?
Yeah. I think
Okay.
Jerry's got to give us a lead on this. What does he really
Okay.
think, and then what should we do?
Okay. So Jerry, can I ask you to address Don's concerns?
Yes, I'm thinking that it should be done at this point more from a macro basis because of the relationship that's developed between China and the U.S. and the trade lines, etc. Just from an investment perspective, I think some of the investments are not right for certain of the plans. And certainly what you're saying is very true. For example, maybe there is a combined or a way of splitting this, and maybe that's the way we look at it, combining HMRF and HWRF separately because they're pretty much funded, as you pointed out, and will do okay with more conservative scenario. HSR, on the other hand, has these 500 future 519, I think it was, employees that transferred to owners or beneficiaries that transferred to owners, and now a very long-term liability. So there's more justification for a longer term and greater risk to grow those. And as you'll see later with the things that Mark will be addressing, HMRF and WRF are separate. So I would see where they would be kind of similar, let's put it that way, that they would be subject to the same overall kind of policy, in essence, at least as far as I know, and leave that to the actuaries to tell me that there is very different. To combine it into, say, two pools, or split it into two pools, if that's what you're thinking. Always look at this overall scenario.
Last meeting, we had somebody telling us the HMS, the Hamilton retirement fire, was that put on a safe thing, get 4 or 5%, you're going to be good for the rest of the plan. It ends up, winds up. That is the last one dying. Same with the police now with that surplus they have. It looks like those two plans can just make blue stock, you know, the Bell and I don't know what else, but you follow me? So why we don't want to spend any money that if we really don't need to, if we don't follow it, and they're going to follow for investments that we don't really want to get involved with. You follow me? Jerry, we're safe on.
Yes, I understand that. And certainly that's, if they're at that fully funded, they tend to reduce the risk and in terms of the equity side and invest in basically seasoned stocks that pay dividends, etc., and the long record, which are better for offsetting. Similarly, that's what gets you into investments like real estate, which is, a bit of an inflation protection.
I'm afraid I was scheduled for another meeting at 10. My colleague Kamal Khan is also on the line if there are any other questions, and Vlad is of course here as well. So I'm afraid I need to drop.
No problem. That's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm really trying to be obtuse about this, but straightforward. Yes, it is time, as Nathan was saying, that we do something. It's going to take a period, and certainly there's been enough tumult with, COVID and virtually the political atmosphere in terms of global trade, which is expected to cut down, GDP for various countries because of the breakdown of the trade lines. by 3 to 4% for this. And then you've got COVID breaking down the income levels, etc. Country-wise. Hopefully the breakups aren't that serious, etc. And we have certainly in the stock market gone up, but that's basically because the interest rates have gone down to next to nothing. If you go to your bank and get a GIC, you get what, 0.6? And you get a straggling 1/100th of 1% interest rate on the bank account. Or something like that.
Okay, but Jerry, you're saying we should do this. I think Don's.
I think it's time to do this because it is a good directional issue, and that's what it's really meant for. To try to set a directional course, and certainly the course is the same for HMRF and HWRF. So certainly they should be treated differently in that sense. And but I'm not going to say that having been involved in using one direction as we're doing now, that's been beneficial to HMRF and HWRF insofar as you've gotten some higher returns over the years. Don't forget this has been, what have I been doing for 17 years?
But I don't think
we didn't have this until 2010, just to give us some direction as to what we want to.
Okay, so Jerry, I'm just going to cut in because I think Don's concern is I don't think really is doing the study. It's the $90,000 and how we're going to break it up among the 3 plan holders based on what each plan holder has. So it's not a matter of saying, I don't think he wants to see it split up between the 3 equally, but whoever has the most, you prorate it on that. Am I not correct, Don?
I would say that's fair.
Okay, so I just want
participation kind of thing. I mean, that's the way the master trust is set up, basically.
Right. So I just want to go. Yeah, I want to go back to Don if I can. He's muted now, Angela. I don't know if you can unmute him, and just be sure he's comfortable with that direction.
So through the chair, no, unfortunately, with this new system, I can't unmute anyone. Oh, he's unmuted himself. There we go.
Don, thank you, Don.
Okay, the point is that there's nobody on the HSR represented on this board. So we're making a decision, probably 90,000 to them, because I don't think the HSR, the HMRF and the the police and the fire don't read this. So we're making a decision with nobody from their member of their pension committee, if they have one, or we're making a decision for them. Do you understand my concern?
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, that's it.
Can anyone answer? Brian, is that a concern?
Yeah, hi, it's Rick. Barb did a split on the 90,000 cost between the 3 plans if it was based on assets of the plans, which seems like a reasonable way to allocate the costs. And it would be 56,000 for HSR, 14,000 for HWRF, and 19,000 to HMRF.
But okay, so thank you for that. But the question that Don is saying is there's nobody on this committee for HSR. So are they in agreement that this is going to be a study that's going to be done for them?
Through the chair. In reality, the administrator has a responsibility for making these decisions on the financial aspects of the plan, not this subcommittee or the advisory committee. So, I mean, the advisory committee and the subcommittee can indicate their support for doing the study and forward that on to AF&A. But when it comes to the actual decision, whether this is a financial worthwhile study to be undertaken, that really rests with the administrator of the plan, just the city.
Okay, so
we're responsible for any deficits in the plan because all plans are closed, so there's no active contributions going in from any plan members.
Okay, so I'm going to kind of circle back then, Don. Are you satisfied then with direction this goes forward and it be shared prorated, so to speak? And as Rick has explained, HSR is aware and it's a responsibility to have them included. Correct? Sorry, Don, you're talking, but we can't hear you.
I understand. I gotta unmute.
There you go. There you go. Okay.
Mine says mute now. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Yes.
Hearing
The answer
twice,
is
then
yes. I'm
that's fine.
satisfied with
Okay.
that.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you
Thank
then.
you.
So with that, then can I have a mover and a seconder? Are there any other questions though first? Jim?
No, I was just going to, if it's a requirement, I'll second it. If it's not, I'll just move that we go forward with the study.
Okay, so we have to first receive the presentation. So moved by Jim, second by Don Alford. That's just to receive the presentation. Seeing no hands in opposition, that's carried. And then Jim, you'll move the recommendation to go forward, seconded by Don Alford. So that's the approval of the recommendation. That'll go to Audit and Finance and then approved by Council. So I have that. Is that okay, Don?
Yep.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, I can hear you.
Okay.
So anyone opposed? Seeing none, that carries. Thank you, everyone. So there's that. Okay, 8.2.
So,
is
sorry,
Angela.
Sorry, through the chair, just we need to approve the recommendations of the report as well.
Oh, I thought I did that in that second mover and seconder. Okay.
Okay,
So
I thought that was on the motion for the asset liability modeling study. That's within the report recommendations.
Okay, hang on. Sorry, Angela. Okay, so we have
okay.
a mover to approve the recommendations in the report.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Moved by Jim, second by Don Alford.
Okay.
No one opposed? Carries. Okay.
And my apologies, councillors. Did we also then do the motion on the asset liability modeling study?
Well, that's not even on here. Oh, sorry.
It's a separate
That was his
motion.
presentation and we received his presentation.
Yes, we received the presentation and then I thought we approved the motion, but maybe I'm incorrect.
We moved, okay, so mover and second to approve the recommendations in the report. That's what I have here.
Okay, I apologize.
And that was done.
So
That's
we have not done the motion on the asset liability modeling study then.
Yes, we have.
Okay. So we've done 3. So they were all 3.
I have 2.
Okay.
In front of me.
So I thought we received the presentation. I believe we did. And then I thought we approved the motion.
There is no motion. There is no motion. We approved the recommendations in the report to go forward.
Okay. I don't believe the recommendations in the report include the asset liability study.
Okay, well, that doesn't make sense then. Why would that? Just a second, let me go back to it. Oh dear, no, sorry, just going back to the, I'm working 2 computers here, so, okay.
So I have for the recommendations of the report that Appendix A attached to report FCS 20074 respecting the City of Hamilton defined benefit pension master plans trust statement of investment policies and procedures be approved and replace the previous one from 2019. And that Appendix A, which is that defined benefit pension plan master statement trust of investment policies and procedures be forwarded to the Hamilton Street Railway Pension Administration Committee. Nothing in those recommendations.
Okay, sorry, Angela, but that's not before me at all. But so I'm now confused. So I'm just trying to get. All I had was the 8.1.
Yes.
To receive the presentation by Nathan LaPierre.
Correct.
And then questions, and then to have to move in a second to approve the recommendations in the report. That's
yes,
what we did.
the motion. Yes, I apologize. I thought that you got to move in second to do the asset liability modeling study. I thought that that's what had happened, but if that didn't happen at all, that's fine. I will cross that out.
But the report says to move forward with the $90,000 and its staff. That's all in there, correct?
No, that's not in there. That's why I'm so it's just a.
Okay, so can I have a mover then and a seconder to move the motion that the asset, I'm just going to try and word it off of here because Angela's not in here.
Yeah, would you like to read out what I have, Councillor?
Yes, please.
Yeah, that an asset liability modeling study be performed on the HMRF, HWRF, HSR pensions up to a limit of $90,000 allocated, HSR 56,000, HMRF 9,000, HWRF 15,000, and be funded from their programs, their pensions.
Okay. And that was the information that was given by Rick as well. So moved by, is it okay, Jim? Moved by yourself. Second by Don Alford. Jim, question? Okay, Jim? Sorry, can't hear you, Jim.
I was just going to add that I'm getting a lot of interference
I know.
from one of the mics. And,
because we have a couple, I think some members are in twice, and that's presenting a problem. Actually, Don Alford's now in 3 times. So it's presenting a problem when that happens. And I know we don't want to lose anybody, so we're just going to sit tight for today.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, so you're moving it, Don Alford seconding it. All in favor? Any opposed? If none opposed, that's what we'll show. Everyone's in favor. Thank you. That carries.
Thank you, Councillor. Sorry about that.
No problem. We're going to move on to 8.2 is the Hamilton Wentworth Retirement Fund, HWRF valuation at December 31, 2019, FCS 20064 citywide. Mark Pearson from Aon, no relation, Mark, is here to go through the HWRF valuation with committee. Welcome, Mark.
Hi there, and hello, everyone. Just want to make sure that, can you hear me and you can see my screen?
We can. Thank you, Mark.
That's great. So just like to thank the committee for inviting me here today. I hope everyone's well. And I'll especially like to thank Bob Howe for putting together this summary that was included as part of the agenda that was sent out. This is an excellent summary that goes into all the detail of the valuation report that I've put together. And if you've read it, it has all the necessary information that you need to understand the valuation report. So I do encourage you to read the summary, but I believe my purpose today is to actually walk you through the actuarial valuation report itself and to give you the opportunity to ask me questions on that. And feel free to stop me at any time. I can't see everyone's faces, so I'd ask that the chair keeps an eye out for people asking questions, and I'll obviously stop to address them.
We'll have to catch them at the end, Mark, because I can't see faces of everyone with your presentation up in front of us.
Okay, that's fine. So this is a required valuation as at December 31st, 2019. It's a valuation for funding purposes, and it's also a legislative requirement. And because of the strong funding position of the plan, the next valuation isn't due for another 3 years as at December 31st, 2022. So this is a 50-page report. I'm not going to go through every page. I'm going to jump around to give you the highlights and to help you understand what has changed since the last valuation. And there has been some changes. In particular, there's been some significant legislative changes that Nathan talked about, funding reform. So we'll talk a bit about that because it does help explain why some of the numbers have changed as they are. So importantly, we're required to do 3 valuations: the going concern valuation, the solvency valuation, and the hypothetical wind-up valuation. So I'm going to give you a bit of a background on each of these valuations to help you understand what we're doing. The going concern valuation is a long-term view, takes a long-term view of the plan as if it continues to operate and pay pensions. We use long-term assumptions, and we set our discount rate based upon the expected return on your plan assets, which Nathan was just talking about. So we look at your asset portfolio and we estimate, or we come to a conclusion of what that portfolio would earn over the long term, and that's our discount rate for this valuation. So I'm going to drop down and talk about the hypothetical wind-up valuation next. And this valuation it's an estimate on what it would cost to wind up the plan at the valuation date. So when I say wind up the valuation, I mean what you would do, wind up the pension plan is you would go out to an insurance company, a Canadian insurance company, buy annuities for all the pensioners in the plan. There are only pensioners in this plan, pensioners and beneficiaries. And you buy annuities, and then the plan will be deregistered, and that will be the end of the plan. You've offloaded all your liabilities to the insurance company. And as you can see, at the moment, you don't have sufficient funds to do that. Theoretically, you could do this at any point in time, but if you chose to do that at the valuation date, you would have to come up with another $9.5 million to fund the estimated deficit of buying annuities with the Canadian insurer. So the solvency valuation is essentially the same as the hypothetical wind-up valuation, but we're allowed to exclude certain liabilities. And in particular, we can exclude the cost of post-retirement indexation. So that's the cost of increases to the pensions each year to reflect the cost of living. So you can see actually the difference between the 50 and the 64. So that just tells me that on a solvency basis, the cost of post-retirement indexation is about $14 million. So you can exclude that. And why this is different is that under Ontario pension law, you're only required to fund these two valuations, the going concern and solvency. You're not required to fund for the hypothetical wind-up valuation. That's just an indication of what it would take to wind up the plan. But you do have to fund under Ontario law these two valuations. So these are the two key valuations in terms of your contribution requirements. And if you look back 3 years, there was actually a $3 million solvency deficit at that valuation, and you've been funding that over the last 3 years at about $1.2 million a year. So what we're looking for now is surpluses, and we are seeing surpluses. So that's the good news takeaway from my presentation today, is that for the HWRF plan, there are surpluses and there are no funding requirements for this plan. So I also want to draw your attention to the change here. You can see the change is fairly consistent, the improvement in the funding position for solvency and hypothetical wind-up. And there has been an improvement. So there's been a couple of key factors, is that you have put in more money into the plan and asset performance has been good. So that's the key factors driving these two changes in these valuations. Now, this is a lot more complicated. The change in the going concern valuation is a lot more complex because there has been substantial change to Ontario funding rules, and we're going to go and take a look at that in a bit. So in particular, we're going to talk a little bit about this adjustment a little bit later as well. The other thing I'd like to talk about is just to remind you that you are on a glide path. You have been talking about an asset liability modeling study. At the current time, you are on a glide path. That means that as your hypothetical wind-up position of the aggregate of all your three plans improves, then you actually change your asset mix and slowly de-risk. So you're taking more risk when there's a bigger deficit, but as the deficit reduces, you are slowly reducing your asset risk over time. And again, we'll see that in more detail in a bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you now to talk a bit about changes to Ontario pension law. And this is important. It was covered in Barb's summary. So you've already had a good summary of what's happened, but this is a very significant change since the last valuation. I think most of you are aware, and I heard Jerry talking about it, interest rates have been falling over the last decade. And the solvency valuation is actually based upon current interest rates marked to market. And those interest rates have been dropping down below 3%, which means that the solvency valuation was creating some very large liabilities and was causing a lot of funding challenges to many employers, many Ontario plan sponsors, and yourselves. You were funding an additional $1.2 million a year to fund your solvency deficit. And so there was a lot of discussion in the industry, and it seems that the regulators came to the conclusion that the solvency valuation, which is really, it's talking about a hypothetical wind-up, and in most cases, most of our plans are ongoing, so it's not a typical situation for many plans. So it's They aren't intending to wind up. So a lot of people felt the solvency valuation was far too conservative. And in the end, the regulators did change. Quebec led the way, de-emphasizing the solvency valuation and moving the focus to going concern. And Ontario followed shortly thereafter in 2018 and did the same. So they've moved the focus away from the solvency valuation to the going concern valuation. So the focus is now back on a long-term view, funding the plan through going concern. So one of the first things that happened was that Ontario introduced what was called a provision for adverse deviation. So this is like a margin for bad times in evaluation. But we've always had margins in valuation work, actuarial valuation work. It's just that they haven't been regulated. And the difference now is that the margin is now regulated. And in your case, the margin is now much more conservative than the margin I included at the last valuation. And we'll see that when we move further into the report. Second change is that now they're requiring you to fund deficits over a shorter period. So over 10 years instead of 15 years. And you can see here the third bullet is that you're no longer required to fund the solvency deficiency if you're above 85% funded, which your plan is above 85% funded.
Super.
In fact, it's above 100% funded, so there are no concerns. For solvency, there is no deficit. But for a lot of pension plans, this was a great break. Those that were around 90% funded, they were still funding very significant amounts of money over a 5-year period. So this is a very significant change for many Ontario plan sponsors. What is a big change for you is this bullet, because you do have post-retirement indexing in your plan, and I've already indicated how much value that is for solvency. Now, there is an allowance, or there was an allowance under the old funding rules that you did not have to include the liability for post-retirement indexing in the going concern liability, and there was, and instead you could fund it through your normal cost, which was required substantially less cash. That has been taken away, and now we do have to include the value of post-retirement indexing in the going concern valuation, and the going concern assumptions are less conservative than solvency. So I talked about the $14 million value of post-retirement indexing on a solvency basis. On going concern, it's $9 million. So you now have an extra $9 million of liability on your going concern liability that the change to the funding rules has basically introduced. So that's a very significant change for this plan. Okay, so those are the main items that will affect this valuation. There are other items that Barb is aware of that for compliance you would have to follow for the new funding rules. In particular, the plan will have to be amended. It's a fairly minor amendment just to reflect the new funding rules, and you will have to include some wording in the member statements that go out next year, and I believe Barb's aware of that, and that will be done, and we'll work with her as necessary to do that. So that's an introduction to funding reform, and it will actually affect all 3 plans that are being filed this year. Well, it certainly affects the HSR plan, and it will affect Bill's plan as well. Any questions on that? Otherwise, I'll move on.
I can't see if somebody would like to just unmute and say you have a question. If not, we'll move ahead.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some background now. So I'm going to jump ahead and talk a little bit about the assets. So for defined benefit plans, there are 2 sides to the equation. There is the assets and there are the liabilities. And I've already hinted that the assets did well this year, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But what I want to highlight here is just a little bit of a change in the asset mix, in particular, the fixed income. So going back to your glide path, the hypothetical wind-up position has been improving, and as the hypothetical wind-up position improves, you've been de-risking, moving more into fixed income assets. And in particular, your fixed income target is now 52%, And I don't have the number here, but it was 40% 3 years ago. So that's quite a significant change in your target fixed income allocation. But it means that now you're taking on less risk on the asset side than you were 3 years ago. But it also means your expected returns are lower than they were 3 years ago. And that affects the discount rate that I will be setting for the going concern valuation. Now, this glide path is an ongoing journey. And while we are at this point, ultimately, we will be moving to this point when the plan is fully funded. So this is the ultimate endpoint of your glide path, where you would be in 85% in fixed income, which is very much a largely de-risked pension plan. So just taking a quick look at what's happened to the assets. For a mature plan such as this, I think it was Don was saying we're all retired here. There's no new people coming into the plan. So we're expecting the assets to drop over time. 59 million has now gone to 54. And that's primarily because you're paying $6 million out in benefits every year, and investment returns simply won't be able to replace that. So as much as you've been earning good investment income, ultimately the value of the plan is going to slowly reduce as the pensions are paid out and the numbers of members in the plan reduce. So the good news is here. So the investment returns have been good. They've been 6% per year, which from an actuarial's perspective, it beats my assumption as at the last valuation, which was 4.5%. So that means the plan has gained. So that explains a lot of the reason why the position of the plans has improved since we last talked about this 3 years ago. Okay, so let's now move on to the membership. So what I want to highlight here again, the plan is it's a closed plan with retirees and beneficiaries. So obviously we're expecting people to die over time, and the plan will slowly reduce until no one's left. But what I want to highlight here is that there's been an 18% reduction in membership. And so broadly speaking, you would expect an 18% reduction in your liabilities. And you do reduction in those liabilities, which makes total sense. The other thing I would like to point out is that the probability of death for about an 81-year-old male is about 4 to 5% a year. So over 3 years, you would be expecting 12 to 15% reduction in membership. And we're seeing 18% reduction in membership. So why I'm going into this is that our assumption for mortality was a little bit too conservative, and we're actually seeing members dying a bit quicker than we expected. So that, from a plan perspective, that means the plan will make gains because you're not paying as many pensions out as you would expect. And we've actually made some changes to the assumptions, and I'm going to talk a bit about that in a little bit. So I just wanted to highlight that fact. So going into the data again, just give you some idea. So it's been 3 years since the last valuation. So you expect everyone's going to age 3 years, but you see the average age is going up by 2, but then you have people who are dying, who are typically older, so they bring the average age down. But you see on the same beneficiaries and retirees, we see the average age going up by 2 years for the same reason. Similarly, the average pension goes up because typically the older people have the smaller pensions. When they were earning the pensions, the salaries were a lot lower. So as the older people die off, then the actual average pension does tend to increase, and we're seeing that for both groups. So that's just a bit of background on the data. It makes total sense. Okay. So if there's no questions, I'm now going to talk a bit about the assumptions, which are the key inputs to the valuation, other than the assets and the data. So I'm going to move on now. Okay. So first of all, we're going to go back to the changes that I talked about to the Ontario funding rules. And in particular, the first point we talked about was the provision for adverse deviation, which is a margin. So the Ontario regulator is now requiring you as me as the actuary to your plan to include about a 10% load on your liabilities as a margin. And this is a risk-based margin. So primarily it's being driven by your asset mix. And the more risk you take with your assets, the higher the margin is. So, and I've seen margins lower than this because for a plan such as this, where it's very, it's actually all inactive liability. This is a little bit unusual because you still have quite a substantial holding in equities, which, and as you know, equities are more volatile and have substantially more risk. So this is a little bit unusual that you've got such a large provision for adverse deviation. If I go back 3 years, I also mentioned before that actuaries have always put margins in their assumptions to allow for bad times and to fund a little bit more aggressively to get 100% funded. And 3 years ago, what I had was a margin in the discount rate. So the discount rate 3 years ago was actually 4.8%. And you can see it's now 4.4. And the reason for the reduction in the discount rate is essentially because you've moved more into fixed income as part of your de-risking move over the years. So that explains the reduction in the discount rate. But the 0.3% margin I had in my discount rate 3 years ago was equivalent to 2% of liabilities. That was the margin I was holding as a provision for adverse deviations. So you can see that margin, 2% from 3 years ago, has now gone to 10%. So that's a very significant change. The problem is this is legislated, and 3 years ago, this was essentially chosen by the actuary as being suitable for the plan. So the regulator has essentially said that we need a larger margin in this valuation, and that does affect the numbers quite significantly. It increases your liabilities by about $4 million. The other assumption I've changed this time is I've reduced inflation. 2.25% is looking quite high, and 2% is actually even high at this time, but this remains 2% inflation remains the Bank of Canada target, and it's a reasonable assumption for the midterm, I would say. So we've just made that, and it's less conservative because inflation is, the assumption is for increases to pensions because your pensions are linked to inflation. So we now have a lower assumption. So that means we're assuming smaller increases to pensions, which means lower liability. Now, the mortality assumption is very key for this plan because we have a lot of older pensioners in the plan. And as you can see, we have changed the assumption here. And this goes back to my point that we noticed that the membership was reducing a little bit quicker than expected. And we reviewed some of the last actuarial valuations that have been filed, and we've seen gains now over the last 10 years. So we're quite justified to make this assumption less conservative. And we did do an analysis of the mortality of members over, it was about the last 6, 7 years. And our estimate of the appropriate mortality table is the same table, but we're rating it. So we're assuming that the mortality of your group, the HWRF group, is 15% higher than the public sector group. So that's a change we've made, and that has also reduced your liability because we're now assuming that people will die off a little bit quicker, but that's in line with what we've observed over the last 10 years. Okay, so that was the going concern valuation. For solvency, this is the mark to market. It's marked to current interest rates at the date of the valuation. And as you can see, very little has changed in the last 3 years. So there's nothing really that I need to comment on here. So I'll just move on. So now we've had a look at the going concern assumptions. What I want to do now is show you what we call the gain loss analysis, which gives you an idea of the financial impact of all these factors. So if you remember, the going concern position 3 years ago was a $4 million surplus. So what we're going to do is reconcile that $4 million surplus to the $2 million surplus we're seeing now. First of all, you've been paying special payments. Remember, you had a solvency deficit at the last valuation. You were funding about $1.2 million a year. That goes towards increasing your surplus on a going concern basis up to $8.5 million. Your investments did well. That meant the plan profited by about $2 million. And then your mortality experience, we noticed people were dying off a little bit quicker. So again, the plan gained because it paid out less pensions. Indexation experience, so CPI increases to pensions were lower than expected. So the plan gains because pensions increased slower. We did have some coding changes this time that we introduced. Now, this was the big item, $9 million. We've bought that post-retirement indexation has been bought back into the going concern liability. So that's increased. So this is a loss to the plan. Increased your liabilities by $9 million. We've now introduced the provision for adverse deviation as per the new funding rule requirements. And that's increased your liabilities by $4 million. And then you have the other key one here is we've made your mortality table less conservative. And the plan has gained now because the expectation is people won't be living as long as before. So you have a gain here of $3 million. So that reconciles your $4 million surplus last time to the $2 million surplus this time. So that takes me back to this page. I just want to go briefly over the results again. So just going over solvency. So we've seen that the assumptions didn't change a whole lot, but what has helped here is that we've had some good help from the asset side, strong asset performance, and we've had some favorable experience from mortality. And that essentially explains the improvement in the funded position for these two valuations. For this valuation, we've seen there's been a lot of factors, but the two key factors are this provision for adverse deviation, which is the larger margin that the regulator requires, and bringing in the post-retirement indexation into that liability. But again, as I said, the key here is that you have a surplus for going concern and a surplus for solvency, so no funding is required. You see your solvency is above the 85, your funded ratio is above 100. And this is what we'll be reporting in the report, is that there are no funding requirements for this plan for the next 3 years until you file the next valuation. So that's really what I wanted to cover. I've just tried to hit on the main factors of this valuation, but I'm more than happy to take any more specific questions if the committee has them at this time.
Sorry, Mark. If you could take down your presentation, then I can see if any committee members want to chime in. Is there anyone that has any questions on this presentation by Mark? Quite thorough and appreciate that, Mark.
Thank you.
And good news. Thank you.
Good news.
Yes. Any questions of committee? If not, can I have a mover or a seconder to receive the presentation? Moved by Councillor Ferguson, second by Don Scarrett. Okay. Councillor Ferguson, you have a question? Go ahead.
Yes, I do. These type of presentations are very hard to follow. You know, we come out of an all-day GIC meeting or a planning meeting when you come into this, and it almost gives me a headache to listen to it all. But if I look at Rick and Barb's report, it looks...
Sorry, Councillor, you're breaking up. You're breaking up, Councillor. I wanted to take your video. Thank you. Okay.
So with all these pluses and minuses, I went to the executive summary that Rick and Barb prepared, and it looks like we're okay. And I think I heard the presenter say the same thing.
Yes.
So it's difficult to follow, though, Madam Chair. I don't know how the rest of the committee feels, but to follow that presentation with all these numbers and all these variances and indexing costs, but somehow it all washes out in the end. So I don't know what to make of it. Maybe there's an easier way they can present this in the future without going into all those enormous details and just bring us to the bottom line. But
thank you for those. Yeah, thank you for the comments, Councillor. And I don't disagree. With COVID, it does present a problem as well. It may have been easier if we're sitting around a table together, but we can't do that right now. So are there any other comments or concerns or questions? Seeing none, can I have a move and a second to receive the presentation And I'm going to ask again, Councillor Ferguson, would you like to move to receive it? And seconded by Don Scarrett, if that's okay?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay. Is anyone opposed? Thank you. That carries. Angela, you have that?
Yes, Madam Chair, I do. Thank you.
Thank you. And then may I have a mover and a second to approve the recommendations in the report? I'm going to again ask Councillor Ferguson, second by Don Scarrett. Anyone opposed? Seeing not, that carries, and you have that as well, Angela.
And Madam Chairman, just so you
Yes.
know,
Yes, Madam Chair.
I have
Go
another
ahead.
I have 11:30 meeting, so I'll have to sign off then. How long is the next presentation?
Well, I'm hoping not too much longer. I have a noon meeting myself and then one right after, so hopefully we'll get through these. We have two more presentations, I think, before us. So let's see how we do.
Just one more, Madam Chair.
Just one more.
Yeah.
Okay, so item 8.3 then, we'll move right along, is Hamilton Municipal Retirement Fund, HMRF, valuation at December 31, 2019, FCS 20065, citywide. Bill Liu, Phyllis Towers Watson is here to go through the HMRF valuation with committee. Welcome, Bill, and hopefully you can condense what you can in your presentation. Thank you, sir.
Sure. Thanks everyone for inviting me here. I'm going to share my screen now.
No, now they're just getting to HMRF. And
so can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to change the format a bit. Actually, you see that there are two presentations. One is a report similar to Mark's report. It's a different format, but the contents are basically the same.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm going to present is the second one, which is in PowerPoint form, and hopefully this will make it a little bit easier for you to follow.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the agenda of my presentation, but since Mark Pearson have already presented certain content because the similarities between the two plans, I'm only going to cover whatever is different and special for this plan.
Thank you.
So first, the executive summary. Hopefully this will be a lot easier for you to follow. So this is the highlights of the December 31st, 2019 valuation. The last valuation was performed December 31st, 2017. And since the last valuation, the solvency funded ratio has increased by 1.7%. And the going concern funded ratio has dropped a little bit to 1.8%. This is consistent with the other plan that Mark presented. The drop of the going concern funded ratio is because we have not updated the mortality assumption. I'll provide more details later. So the reason of the increase of the solvency funded ratio is because of the favorable investment returns. And also the small drop of the going concern is because of the assumption change, mainly the discount rate change drop, and also the demographic experience loss. And you can see the contributions, the plan is in good funded status, and during the past years, and you have not, need to put in any contribution, so it's all zero. And these two charts, this chart just shows, a slight increase in the solvency position and a small decrease in the going concern position. Any questions on this chart? Hopefully this is a lot easier for you to follow.
If anyone wants to just pipe in if you have something. If not, we'll continue on. Bill, thank you.
So this is the valuation. For the asset to the plan Mark just presented, we have a similar loss in 2018, but a significant gain in 2019. And the overall asset return is higher than the assumptions we use. So this resulted in an actuarial gain of 0.5 million. Any questions on the assets? Okay, so this is the going concern valuation positions. So I just want to let you know that different from the plan that Mark presented, we already reflected the Ontario funding reform in the December 31st, 2017. So you can see the the positions have not been changed a lot since the last funding valuation. So just a small drop in the funding ratio, and we already included the provision for future pension increases for all our valuations, and also we already included the provision for adverse deviations for both valuations. So the current funded ratio is 1.096 before including the provision for adverse deviations. And if we include the provision for adverse deviations, the funded ratio is 1.037. So to help you understand this, this is a little chart just to provide you with the an idea the funded position of the plan. So for current valuation is 103.7 after reflecting the PFAT, and it's 105.1 after reflecting the PFAT from the December 31st, 2017 valuation. So this is the gain and loss reconciliation, which gives you an idea of what have changed since the last funding valuation. So as of the last funding valuation, we have 3,739 in thousand of surplus, and we have interest on this surplus of 286, and we have a 455,000 investment gain. We have a small mortality loss, which means during the past 2 years, the retirees and beneficiaries are having a better experience and they are living longer. The pension COLA adjustment, we have a small loss because the actual pension increase is slightly higher than the 2% we assumed. And we have a small loss of 104,000 because of the experience. The discount rate dropped because of the change of the financial market. So we have a 2 million loss here, and we have a small increase due to the change of the PFAT assumption. This gives us the surplus of 2.5 million as of December 31st, 2019. So here comes the solvency and wind-up valuation. So we included the provision for wind-up expenses of 150,000. Because in case of the plan wind-up, we will need to do valuation report and send out a member statement, and all these will have some expenses there. So this is an assumed expense, and we assume that the expense will increase by 50,000 from the last valuation. The solvency liability is 57.9 million, and we have a solvency surplus of 13.4 million. So the solvency ratio is 1.235, which is about 2% higher than the last valuation. Well, as Mark have already introduced, the solvency liability does not include the future pension increases. And if we take that into consideration, we'll need to add about $15 million, and that will be the wind-up liability of the plan, and that will make the wind-up or the transfer ratio of the plan into 0.981, which is slightly underfunded. So this chart gives you an idea of the solvency valuation status of the plan. So the funding requirements is all good news, and no contributions required until the next required funding valuation report is filed as of December 31st, 2022. And since you have a small wind-up deficit, you can still put in 1.5 million if you would like to. So talk about the risk assessment of the plan. This is the new requirement applicable for valuations on or after March 1st, 2019. So we are required to consider the following risks. The first risk is the interest rate risk. What if the interest rate would drop? What the funded status of the plan will be. And the second factor to consider is the deterioration of the asset values. It's mainly the risk-seeking assets. That's basically the equities and non-fixed income assets. The third factor to consider is the longevity risk. What if the members or the beneficiaries of the plan will live longer than expected? And the fourth one doesn't apply for HMRF. This is for, where you have limitations on the contributions to go into the plan. So a plausible adverse scenario would have a non-trivial probability of occurring within the short term. Basically, we're looking at the shock within 1 year time frame. And in general, we would like to consider the likelihood of 1 in 10 or 1 in 20. Like in the report, we have disclosed the results in general, like it's between 1 in 10. Basically, it's the 10% percentile of the adverse scenario. And this chart shows you what will happen if something happened. The first column is the baseline. This shows that the plan has a surplus of 2.5 million. And if we have an interest rate risk, that means if the discount rate, if the fixed income bond yield dropped, and what will happen to your plan, that your plan would have a small improvement and your funded position would be 3.7 million overfunded. And the third column shows what if the equity market have a significant drop. If that happened, because currently the plan is heavily invested in the equity market, then your plan would have a deficit of 5.5 million. The fourth column is about the longevity risk, which means if everyone lives like a 1 year longer, what the funded position would be, then the funded position would be a deficit of 2.2 million. If everyone will live, the expected life of every person would increase by 1 year. Any questions? I think that's about the valuation result. Anyone have any questions before I move on to talk about the background? I think the background Mark already mentioned is basically, you have the going concern and solvency evaluations. One is long-term, one is the plan would be wound up as of the evaluation date. The funding requirement is similar. You would have normal cost. This is a closed plan. There's no normal cost. And if you have a going concern deficit or solvency deficit, you need to put in special payment to cover these deficits. So the plan is in good funded status, so no amortization contribution is required. So this basically tells you the market change during the past year. And for the annuity purchase, the solvency, basically the assumption has not changed from the last valuation, but the annuity purchase rate have dropped by 20 bps, mainly due to the decrease of the long-term bond yield. So these Mark have already covered. I'm not going to repeat. So the discount rate for the ongoing concern basis have dropped 45 bps, and this have give us a little bit higher going concern liability. The main reason of this is because of the expected return of the asset have decreased during the past 2 years. So solvency valuation, basically, we didn't see a lot of changes. However, because of the plan has a COLA built in, the annuity purchase price did increase. You can see that if we put into the effective discount rate, it's basically negative 0.3%, comparing with the negative 0.1% from the last valuation as of December 31st, 2017. The membership data, this is the closed plan, and you see that the retired and the beneficiaries both decreased during the past 2 years. Any questions before I move to the next steps?
Go ahead, Bill. You can finish it off.
Sure. So first of all, the committee need to make a decision on whether to file the funding valuation report as of December 31st, 2019. This is because based on the Ontario funding rules, the next required valuation is actually December 31st, 2020, because the last one was December 31st, 2017. However, the advantage of filing this is, you can lock in the good funded status of the plan, and you don't need to put in any contributions for the next 3 years. As we know, the market the financial market is quite volatile, so it will be good. It doesn't do any harm to file this valuation. So if this valuation is filed, then the next required funding valuation will be as of December 31st, 2022.
Cool.
Yeah, and the next step, like as we always do, we would recommend you adjust the asset allocation based on the funded status of the plan and SIPP. Currently, the SIPP is on gold path, which is the investment asset mix is based on the wind up position of the plan. And also for ongoing monitoring, for after each valuation, WTW will provide the future cash flows to the investment manager so that they can use that cash flow to align their asset mix so that to hedge the risk of the plan. Another thing we would like to recommend is that to do a mortality assumption review. For this plan, even though we had a small loss this year, but based on the prior valuations, we've been having a mortality gain, which means the table used likely is more conservative than the actual mortality of the pensioners and the beneficiaries. And as you can see, Mark has already updated the mortality assumption for the other plan to make it less conservative and to reflect the actual experience or the actual expectation of the mortality of the group. So the selection of appropriate assumptions is an important component of good governance and sound risk management. And also, you would you cannot do an experience study because the plan membership is too small. You only have like about a couple of hundred people there, so it's very difficult to do a experience study with enough credibility. So we developed a new tool. It's called the Canadian Postcode Mortality Tool. So this is a useful, straightforward, and also very easy to use, and it doesn't require a lot of headcounts. I'll just quickly, cover what this tool use. So UK is the pioneer of using this tool. They have already had 10 years of experience, and we borrow their experience, and we include the people's age, their gender, their pension amount, their job type, and also their savings, the regular doctors, like based on the postcode. Because if you live in a good region, you're expected to live longer. So, and it only need 50 members to be credible to use this tool. And the result could, as the markup showed you, like by changing this mortality assumption, your liability decreased by about 2 million, which means the impact of this mortality assumption is quite material to your liability. And also, I think you need to consider like all plans like in aggregate, just to make sure like you're using the mortalities like consistently, and also you show that you have some support, a good support to justify the mortality assumption you use. So also this can be also leveraged to the financial reporting, which is the accounting report you provide in April every year. So this could also be leveraged for that purpose. So we would recommend you, like to review your mortality assumption based on the postcode. Another reason we're recommending this is that because both plans are closed plans, you can see that there are more beneficiaries in the plan as time going on. So it would no longer be enough just to based on the mortality on the members profile, because more and more significant portion of the population will be beneficiaries rather than members. So that concludes my presentation, and hopefully this will be a little bit more easier for you to understand. And I'll close this, and let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Bill. And if you could just take down your presentation so I can see everyone would be great. Is there questions from any? Down.
I'm trying to stop sharing. Okay.
There we go. Thank you for that. Is there anyone that has any comments, questions, or concern? I will, if I can relinquish the chair. I'm not sure who's here as the vice, but I just want to ask, so do we have to give direction, Angela, to staff if we want the review of the mortality assumption to be completed? Because that's not part of the recommendation.
Yeah, through the chair, we would have to do that, and I'm not certain. We'd also have to know how it's being funded as well.
Okay, so a mover and a seconder to receive the presentation. Moved by Bob Splack. How's that? Second by Don Scarrett. And a show of hands if you're opposed. Jim, did you have a question? Jim,
no,
did you
I was just going to move the motions.
Okay, we already received the presentation. That's carried, Angela. Then I'm going to ask, can I have a mover and a seconder to approve the recommendations in the report, including the review of the mortality assumption? And maybe I should ask staff first, what do we anticipate the cost of that being, and how does that get processed?
So the cost is about 3,000 to 5,000 for each plan. However, if we're doing, I believe there are like 3 plans.
Yes.
We can provide results for by plan and in aggregate. So like it could be like around 10,000 for all 3 plans. Of course, we would need data because we only have certain data for the HMRF plans, and we would require data from the consultant from other plans, so that we can put that into our tool to generate the robust results.
Okay, so can I ask staff to assist? Would it be something that we should send back to formulate the direction that we need to go forward on? Because we don't have it before us today. If they don't have the information, we don't have it.
Through the chair, it's Rick.
Yep.
This is the first I've seen this was just as the presentation was unfolding.
Mm-hmm.
I would like the opportunity to investigate what the benefits would be to the plans. If it makes sense for one plan, it might make sense for 3 plans. So there'd be a differential in cost for 3 plans. I'd just like an opportunity for Barb and myself to review what's before the committee in regards to the postal code mortality, And we can, and it's within the administrator's realm that he can approve proceeding with it if it makes sense. We don't have to come back to the subcommittee to do that.
Okay, so then would it be appropriate direction that it be a motion giving staff direction to review the postal code, a review of the mortality assumptions for each plan, and determine whether that study should move forward. Does that make sense? So we're giving staff direction to do.
Madam Chair, I'd be happy to move that, but I'm still frustrated by the volume of information that's thrown out and I can't read it. My eyes aren't strong enough to read this report as it's flying by on these things. So if we're still trapped in COVID-19 next year, we got to find out a different way of doing this, because I'm anxious to hear from the other committee members whether they're having the same issues as I am. I'm hearing all three are okay, but you're asking for money to spend, and I appreciate Rick coming in now to have our treasurer give us an overview along with Barb to whether or not what the impact of this indexing is. So I'd be happy to move that, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. And Councillor Ferguson, I'm just trying to check because I've read all of it. So Angela, before we move that, the presentations have been provided to us. I thought they were. So the presentations are attached on each of the items on the agenda. And I know it's frustrating. I know Councillor Ferguson and we're up to our wazoos in meetings, virtual meetings, but maybe, I don't know, hopefully, fingers crossed, we're out of COVID by our next meeting. But that may be something, Angela, that can be looked at as having a presentation provided in hard copy to everyone before the meetings.
Sure, I can look at that for sure.
Okay, Councillor Ferguson.
Listen, I've expressed my issue. I've made a motion to move it off, but it's so difficult even to read it when it's on the computer, because I don't understand it. If the presenter is explaining it to us on a big screen, it's so much easier. We can stop and ask questions on the spot. I couldn't follow this at all today. I'm sorry.
I understand.
But I'm pleased that Rick's prepared to do that for us. And Rick, I assume that'll be before us before it goes to AFNA, will it? Or does it not even have to go AFNA and council?
A cost of that kind of magnitude would not have to go to AFNA. It's within the treasurer authority, who's tasked with doing the administrator of the plan.
Okay, thanks.
So I've got Councillor Ferguson moving that direction and motion. Second by Jim Gardziński. Is that okay, Jim? Thank you. If anyone is opposed, please show. If not, it carries. Thank you, everyone. Now we're going to, and thank you, Bill. Now we're going to move on with discussion items. So 9.1 is the Master Trust Pension Investment Performance Report as of December 31st, 2019, FCS 19075A, citywide. And you had the report before you. Staff are in attendance. Are there any questions on that report? I'm not seeing any indication of any questions. So then may I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report? Moved by Don Skerritt, second by Don Alford. How's that? All in favor? Or any opposed? Seeing none, that carries, Angela.
Thank you.
9.2 is the Master Trust Pension Investment Performance Report as at June 30th, 2020, FCS 20075, citywide. Again, staff are in attendance. You had the report to review. Are there any questions of staff by any members? I'm seeing none, so I'm going to then ask for a mover and a seconder to receive the report. I'm going to ask Bob Slack and Jim Gardziński. Moved and seconded. Is that okay, Bob? Thank you. So anyone opposed? Don, you waved. Did you have a question, Don? No, thank you. So are there any opposed? Seeing none, then that carries. Angela, you have that?
Correct. Yep.
Thank you. We have no motions before us. Any notices of motions today? Seeing none, we have no general information or private and confidential. Now I'll ask for an adjournment. Councillor Ferguson, would you like to move to adjourn? Seconded by Don Alford. Oh, and anyone opposed? Oh, we're all in favor. Angela, you have that.
I just had my magnifying glass, so that helped. Okay. I just want to let everybody know in the committee that Omar's has released that the increase for pensions for 2021 is 0.94. 0.94.
Thank you for that, Don. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you, everyone, for your patience, and have a safe and happy holiday. And hopefully we'll be out of this before our next meeting. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.